Hello, I'm Matthew Hopkinson from the local data company, and this morning we carry out our 10th retail summit at Freshfields, where we discussed a number of the vacancy issues surrounding over 3,000 high streets, shopping centres and retail parks up and down Great Britain. And the report is here and is being sent out to clients, and if you have an interest in having a report, then please do get in touch. So we had an excellent panel chaired by Claire Barrett, who looked at all aspects of the issues that we're facing, and we introduced two new themes into the report this year. The first one was about the health of centres, the model we developed with Morgan Stanley, which analyses 10 attributes, so not just looking at vacancy but also looking at occupancy profiles, the presence of charity shops, food and beverage, etc. And we've spoken about that on previous videos in the past. The other one we've introduced is the persistency of vacancy, and I believe that this is probably going to become one of the most significant statistics that the local data company collects. And what it showed is that there are thousands and thousands of vacant units lying empty for more than 3 years up and down the country. And it is these units which are causing the real problem, and ones which we need to reconsider in terms of change of use. A great debate ensued following the data where we highlighted the north-south divide, but also the great variety of performance within regions. So you can be in the northwest and you may perform very well as Ormskirk, but you may perform very badly as Wigan, or indeed Preston, Stockport or Altrincham. So this was referred to as islands of resilience. So that was interesting to sort of look into it, but ultimately, as we all know, it comes down to the economic wealth of the areas. But the main thing is we have too many shops. We're continuing to build more out of town, and Roberta BLACKMAN-WOODS, the MP for Durham, talks about this in her own constituency of Durham, that they're continuing to build out of town and they have no actual plan for in town. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to this point about planning, and this was highlighted in the Grimsby review, that every town needs to have a strategic plan which they stick to and they can monitor and measure. And that's obviously where the local data company comes in terms of monitoring and measuring exactly what's happening. So we had a great day. Thank you to all of people who attended. Thank you to Freshfields. And we look forward to getting geared up for our next event, which is our Opens and Closures Summit, which will be held at Hogan Lovells on the 13th of October at 5 PM, and we'll be in touch about that. But thank you for listening, and we look forward to keeping you updated.
I'm Claire Barrett. I'm the senior online reporter for the Financial Times on ft.com. I think that the findings from LDC's vacancy report this September show us that although the high street is improving, there is still a latent slab of shops in peripheral areas which are remaining persistently vacant. There's over 1,600 identified that have been vacant for 3 years or more, which is not good for landlords, not good for high streets, and certainly not good for shoppers. In terms of what I think we can see happening on the high street in the next 6 months is an increasing realisation from politicians that they have got to do something about the fact that so much retail spending has shifted online or shifted to places that is not the high street, and think about policies for the next election which can meaningfully reconstruct these areas for communities, whether it's bringing in housing, whether it's councils compulsory purchasing chunks of these things, or whether it's doing something completely different, creating a social space on the high street. I think what we still need to see, despite the economic improvements, are some new ideas.
Good morning. My name is Alexander Anton. I'm chairman and founder of Legacy Portfolio, a specialist acquirer of surplus leasehold liabilities from the retail and leisure sectors. Looking at the LDC half-year report, I think it's good news. The trend is good across the country, albeit slower up northwest and southeast, but then one expect that. I also think that this, from our own perspective, is encouraging because it will mean that more retailers are preparing to take on more space and invest in the future. More specifically, in the high street, we see an increasing realization by the major retailers that they are going to have to address and embrace the internet. As we come out of recession, and we clearly are, we're increasingly finding that retailers are addressing their existing bricks portfolio and looking to identify where they want to be and why they want to be there as their growing online presence increases their revenues and their profits. We think this is all for the better and look forward to working with them in the future. However, one fly in the ointment as of yesterday was the unfortunate demise of Phones for You, and this is something which we will all have to absorb as it represents 1% of the number of retail outlets in the UK. Thank you.
My name's Jackie SADEK and I am the policy advisor to Greg Clark, the Minister for Cities in the Cabinet Office. I advise on urban regeneration. And I'm always thrilled to be part of an LDC Retail Index breakfast because you always learn so much. And this time's report, well, we've learnt a lot yet again. A rising tide might not lift all boats, but actually I'm quite quietly pleased about the results for the north of England. I know it still lags the south markedly, but you'll know from Greg Clark's devolution agenda that we are attempting to push power and resources out into the northern conurbations, and if we could just get the northern conurbations to run their economies like a business, a bit like in the principles of the Grimsey report, then we believe there is all to play for. Having said that, I think the future of the high street, and I've been saying this consistently for several years, should not be predicated on retail and leisure. It has to be predicated on a whole number of uses, and I think the retail vitality that we're seeing coming back is a welcome sign. It's a sufficient, but not it's a necessary, but not a sufficient component of high street success going forward. In terms of your second question, what can you see happening on the high street in the next 6 months, based on the findings from the quarter one? Well, I think we've got the general direction of travel. The general trends, I think, are now established. We will see, I believe, notwithstanding a couple of very high-profile closures in the last couple of days, we will see returned retail vitality as the economy continues to lift. I think more interestingly will be what happens in this week's referendum in Scotland, because whatever happens, the devolution to our local centres is an inexorable journey that we're on. Whether Scotland votes no and we get Devo Max, or whether it votes for independence, there will be more devolution to English and Welsh cities in the next 6 months and ongoing. And what that means is that savvy local authorities, savvy local enterprise partnerships can grab that opportunity and do stuff about their high street.
I'm Roberta BLACKMAN-WOODS, Shadow Communities and Local Government Minister, and my brief covers the High Street. I think this report from LDC today is extremely interesting because what it tells us is that retail is doing well in some parts of the country, but it's by no means a uniform improvement. What it does, I think, give a real insight to is how the high street is diversifying, and we're getting more leisure, more culture, and what's really suffering in terms of retail is out-of-town shopping centres in some areas of the country. So it brings, I think, very much into the open the regional differences in how our high streets are faring. Some northern towns are doing well, but some are not, and the real reason seems to be the strength of the outlying economy and the extent to which it's possible to bring other uses into the high street. Over the next 6 months, I think we'll be looking at a really interesting time for our high streets, town centres and retail in general. Some of the underlying trends are likely to continue with increased use of internet shopping, but of course a lot of our high streets are now, if you like, getting in on the act and having really good click and collect facilities. So looking forward, I think we probably need to see more diversification, particularly in high streets that are not improving. I think we need to see more housing on our high streets and town centres, and probably our local authorities and the business sector need to have some medium and longer term plans for shopping centres that are really not doing very well at the moment, and where an uplift in retail is not likely to be happening in the next few years.
My name's Alex Singleton and I'm a reader in Geographic Information Science at the University of Liverpool. I'm broadly interested in retail data systems and big data. From my perspective, the thing I thought was most interesting about LDC's vacancy report was the persistence of the regional variation in some of the vacancy rates. The North West still remains double the rate of London. But the thing I think which those regional variations mask, which is quite interesting, is some of the local differences. So for example, within the southeast in Margate, you actually get vacancy rates which are quite high. And similarly, within the northwest in Ormskirk, you actually get vacancy rates which are quite low. So I think looking at regional vacancy rates, you have to be a little bit cautious and to actually look at some of the more local geographies where there are some interesting patterns to be seen. I think in the next 6 months, given the sort of persistence of the current rates, I don't see a lot of change. We may have marginal differences in some of the percentage points. Possibly the thing which could drive these would be some sort of business re-evaluation. Business rates haven't changed for some time, and that's potentially in the context of vacancy rates and current market valuations for rental properties could have some impact on the sort of composition and the rate of vacancy within the high street. But it's unlikely to happen until after the next general election.